Drew.
Paul, tell me I'm not a bad person.
You're not a bad person, Drew.
All right. I needed to hear that, buddy.
Oh, what's wrong?
Man, I'll tell you, I have just been balls to the wall, as they say, for the past 2 weeks, and brother, it's starting to take a toll.
Uh-oh.
I really messed up pretty bad this week.
Okay.
So I had agreed to speak at a user group this week. Just completely forgot.
Oh.
Just completely forgot. I really flaked out on them. Fortunately, it's a pretty chill user group. I think they were able to basically deal with it. But they had asked me to speak, and I had already postponed once, so I felt kind of bad about that. But yeah, they were like, "Hey, can you come this day?" And I said, "Sure." And that day was Tuesday, and I just didn't have it on my calendar for some reason. I didn't even really remember. Yeah, no, I feel like a really bad person because I've had to deal with cancellations and no shows and things like that, and that's never a good situation. And I just
Right.
I just feel really bad about it. So, and I apologized, and they understand. We're gonna try to reschedule at some point in the future, but it was kind of a wake up call because I've just been port and starboard for, like I said, the past 2 weeks, and I'm really hoping things slow down pretty soon. It doesn't look like they're going to.
Yeah, it sounds like you need a little bit of a break.
Yeah. I've just been having to bounce back and forth between a bunch of different projects, and
Right.
my job is actually really hard. My job is actually really hard in a good way. I'm not looking to give up. I'm not looking to throw in the towel. It's just, I'm 8 months into this gig, and it's just, I'm learning something new every day about IT in general and where I work specifically. So yeah, it's a constant learning experience, and it's good. It's fine. Yeah, but I think I need some days off. What about you? What's going on?
You know what? Yeah, I'm just keeping on.
Okay,
Actually,
how's your desk?
at work, it's awful. It's awful. But I think I have got past the RSI issues. My wrists are feeling much better.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So how did you get over it? Was it the gamer lifestyle wrist rest that you bought, or is there something else?
I have been focusing on doing stretching before I start, but I really think I'm not going to give the credit directly to the wrist rest, but I think having it there is a constant reminder to watch my posture and make sure I'm doing everything correctly. So I think it has an indirect effect of making sure that I'm, sitting up straight and, not cutting my wrists into the table and, things like that. So I am feeling much better, but the desk is still hot garbage, and I hope it burns in a fire. Yeah.
And let's be clear, you're no way in advocating that you're going to burn down your place of employment.
Exactly. I just really want this one particular desk just to be removed from the office and set on fire.
So have they given you any sort of indication of how much longer this is going to go on?
I've heard end of this month, middle of April. So we'll see.
You don't sound optimistic.
I don't. I'm not optimistic.
Okay, that's fair. You're allowed to be. You're allowed to be non-optimistic.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Well, let's just jump into this mess. In the show notes this week, and I tweeted an early spoiler of it. I am now on computer number 3 at home.
Okay, so is this a whole nother build?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
No.
So, okay.
No. Okay.
All right. So to tell this story right, oh boy. Okay. To tell this story right, we need to revisit when I first decided to build my last PC. And when I decided to build this last PC, I built this PC back in December, and I had decided that it was time to build an AMD system. I'm really impressed with the things that AMD is doing. They're really scoring some pretty big wins. So I just decided to go and build that computer. So I also made the decision at that time that I was like, you know what, I really want to try to do custom water cooling. I've spoken about that at length on this show, so I'm not really going to spend too much time on that aspect of it. But the plan was, back in December, I was trying to get one of those really cool, really new Ryzen 3950Xs, which is their newest desktop-oriented chip. 16 cores, 32 if you hyper-thread, 3.5 gigahertz boost base clock, and then 4.7 gigahertz boost clock, which is pretty good. It's not as fast for single-threaded performance as the Intel i9s, which is what I had. So in a way, you could look at what I was doing as a bit of a downgrade, but I saw it as an upgrade because I was really interested in some of the other features of the platform, specifically PCIe 4.0 storage compatibility, extra USB and PCIe lanes, better power management, all sorts of other cool little things. So, you know, I made the plunge and I started buying parts, and the intent was to just kind of accumulate parts, and then when I could lay my hands on a 3950, I would go ahead and basically shut down my other old computer and transfer all the parts over to this new build that I wanted to salvage. And the only parts that I really needed to salvage was really my video card, because it's a really expensive video card. So I think I may have mentioned this before. The 3950 launched, and I waited and waited and waited. I was basically visiting Micro Center every day at lunch to see if they got some in. They just weren't getting any in. And at that point, I had gotten every other part that I needed to build this computer. And being the impulsive garbage person that I am, I'm just like, I can't wait anymore. And I just decided to go with a Ryzen 3900X, which is the 12-core, which is their 12-core offering, which is 24 cores hyper-threaded. It has a much higher base clock of 3.8 gigahertz and a boost clock of 4.6. So it boosts 100 megahertz lower, okay?
Okay.
So I bought that, assembled the computer, and that was my first computer build back in December, and that computer was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with it. It worked great. I was having fun with it. It was performing wonderfully. It was water-cooled. Big success. But because, like I said, I'm an impulsive garbage person, finally when January rolled around and the 3950s had become, at that point, a little more generally available, I was in Micro Center. I think I remember asking for things that I could spend Micro Center gift cards on this show. I decided that seeing the 3950 on the shelf, I picked it up. I also picked up a slightly higher product SKU version of the same motherboard that I had built the PC that was currently running at home. And I bought a couple more extra water cooling parts. And the goal of that build was two things. One, I wanted the 3950. It's what I wanted originally. And because I'm impatient and couldn't wait, I picked one up and I was like, well, I'll repurpose this 3900 or sell it or do something with it. So, I picked it up and took it home and started building. And then I also had those parts left over from my original water cooling build that were going to cost more money to return than they were worth. So I had the parts laying around. I had the parts laying around to do this. So, I built it. I was really pleased with the outcome. I had the parts that were custom fit to that one case. It looked really, really good. I was really pleased with it. Seemed like it was performing well, and everything was hunky-dory. Well, last show I talked about how I was getting some weird, game crashes in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and I had chalked it up originally to the game being bad. Well, listen, I've worked in IT for a long time. I've worked on computers for a long time. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep tinkering, and I want to try to figure out what is causing this because, as much as I want to blame this on the game, and it's pretty easy to blame it on the game, I just need to make sure this isn't my computer. So I start digging. I, fiddled with a bunch of settings, both in Windows and in the BIOS, and I came to an interesting conclusion. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand that modern processors, whether you're talking about Intel or AMD, when we're talking about boost frequencies, what we're really talking about is a factory overclock, okay? When you're looking at a processor that you're looking to buy, or a laptop or a desktop computer, there's basically two numbers next to the computer speed. There's what they call the base clock and what they call the boost clock. Now, the base clock is what the processor runs at what we call the quote-unquote stock frequency. So in my case, with my 3950X, that's 3.5 gigahertz. What does that mean? Well, that means that all cores are designed to run at the same time at 3.5 gigahertz under 100% load. Now, through modern processor power management and chipset and motherboard manufacturer differences, usually what that means is that at any given time on your computer, not every single core is active. Through thread scheduling and the way that people design multi-threaded applications these days, or not, usually what this means is there's one active thread on your processor at one time, and everything else is kind of in the background, unless you're running Chrome, and then you've got like all these threads doing, whatever the hell they're going to do. Now, initially, when processors were designed to be multi-threaded, what people realized is that, the average consumer isn't pushing all of their threads all the time, which means that the processors didn't need all the voltage and all the thermal overhead and, thermal headroom and everything else that they needed to function. So what chip makers decided to do was, if we know that all the threads aren't going to be running at 100% all the time, we could probably safely take the frequency of one or maybe two cores and jack that up, take the thermal headroom and take the voltage headroom that we have from the threads that aren't doing that, or the cores that aren't doing that much work, and boost them up. And that's exactly how like Intel Boost technology and AMD's flavor of it, which they call Precision Boost, came to be. And the idea is that, that second number is what the single core or sometimes duo core, it gets a little gray area-ish. If you want to read about this, we'll put some links in the show notes. But those cores can then speed themselves up at the expense of the other cores not doing much. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Okay.
That's a good explanation.
Thank you. I've done a lot of reading over the past few days. So here's the deal. In the course of my troubleshooting, one thing that I noticed with my 3950 was if I went into the BIOS on my computer and I turned off Precision Boost, meaning do not let the processor overclock itself, I had no crashes whatsoever.
Really?
Now, at this point, we need to basically talk about overclocking, whether the overclocking is being handled by the system or you're manually overclocking your hardware. The trick of overclocking is that the higher you go, the more voltage you have to give things, which makes other things unstable. And there's multiple parts of your computer that you can overclock. You can overclock your processor, you can overclock your RAM, you can overclock your service fabric. You can overclock your video card. There's a lot of different things you can overclock here. Now, in my particular case, because I'm building what essentially amounts to a high-end gaming PC that I also do some personal development and other work on, my memory is overclocked over what the standard recommended frequency for memory for this chipset is. Standard recommended frequency for the memory on this computer is 2400 megahertz. I'm running at 3600 megahertz, which, one, I bought memory that is specifically designed to operate at that frequency, and two, I have a motherboard that is certified to run this particular brand of memory at that speed with no problems. Now, what I found is that in my manual overclocking experience, typically you start to see system instability when you are increasing the voltage and frequency of your processor. And, for whatever reason, that causes instability and you see a lot of crashes. And the crashes can be mild or they can be like, holy crap, blue screen crashes. Now, turning off the Precision Boost on my AMD processor made my crashes go away. Now, that in itself would be a solution, but I'm not comfortable only maxing out at 3.5 gigahertz on what amounts to be a $750 processor. That dog just doesn't hunt for me. I'm not getting value for money.
Yeah.
Okay? Now,
and in theory, with all your cooling, you should be able to easily run that thing at max.
And that's
max
the
speed.
other part of this.
Right.
That's the other part of this equation. I wouldn't have invested in all of these really cool copper fittings if I didn't want to be able to push this thing a little harder than it needs to be pushed. So that was kind of clue number one. Now, again, Overclocking instability isn't something new. It can happen, right? But it was happening with relative frequency. So I was like, okay, so something's really going on here. Okay, now, with everything I just said and everything I've explained about kind of how boosting on modern processors works, in AMD land, they call their boost technology precision boost. Now, on top of that, there is another level of boost, and they call it precision boost overdrive. And precision boost overdrive allows you to go just a little bit further than the thermal designs and the voltage designs of the chips. Now, within reason, it monitors itself. It has a feedback loop to know, like, hey, I got to back this off because this is getting really aggressive. But the idea is it allows itself to maintain boost frequencies longer. It allows itself to be a little less sensitive to voltage. There's some really interesting electrical engineering going on in there that I am not going to try to understand at all. But there's basically two levels of their boost. So thinking to myself, I thought, well, what if I can't have precision boost on, maybe, without it crashing, maybe I could turn precision boost on and just turn the precision boost overclock off, meaning just go to 4.7. It's fine. I don't need your crazy high expectations of this. Even though I have this crazy custom water cooling loop and my CPU temperature never goes over 60 degrees C, fine, just let's go. So I turned that off. And it was a complete crap show. Sometimes my network card would just stop working.
Oh, no.
Sometimes my USB ports would stop working. I would get crashes almost immediately on boot. It was really, really bad. And again, the crashes here were very eerily similar to crashes that I was seeing when I was manually overclocking my Intels back in the day. Really weird driver crashes, really weird system kernel level panic type stuff. It was really, really bizarre. So at this point, I had narrowed it down to something was really going wrong with my boost or operating frequencies or operating voltages of this processor. But the other thing that I thought was, well, wait a minute. If my onboard network, onboard USB stuff is starting to flake out, then clearly it must be the motherboard, right? Maybe the motherboard is giving this the wrong voltage. Maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's doing something, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So at no point did I think that I had a bum processor, because
that is a possibility, right?
It is a possibility, but on the list of things that could potentially be causing me this problem, it was not at the bottom, but it wasn't at the top. It would to me, troubleshooter Drew, I was looking at, I was suspiciously eyeing my memory, or I was eyeing the motherboard. Now, on the ease of things to fix, number one is the memory, because you just pop the sticks out and pop them back in, right? So that would have been an easy one to test first. But before I went down that route, I downloaded a memory test program that basically tests every sector of your memory. It tests random reads, random writes, serial reads, serial writes, really pushes it through its paces. I didn't have any checksum errors. I didn't have any sort of memory-related errors on my sticks, so I backed off of that one. So the next thing I did was I drove over to Micro Center, and I picked up a motherboard. And I picked up the same motherboard that I had previously used with my 3900X. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Drew, hang on a second. You still have that old 3900X, and you still have that old motherboard. Why don't you just use that? Well, number one, I had taken that motherboard apart and put a custom water block on it. Mm-hmm. And because the fact that I want to use this 3950X, it's actually easy. Okay, so this is where things take a turn. It's actually easier for me to go to Micro Center, spend $300, buy a motherboard, bring that home, put that in my computer, reuse a old water cooling all-in-one cooler with no thermal paste on it, or just a small dab because I'm in a hurry, throw that in there and test it. So I did that. I went to Micro Center, I bought a new motherboard, I took my other computer apart, I took my custom water cooling loop apart on my 3950X, which was really sad because I was really pleased with how it looked. Cleaned it off, took it out of the other computer, plopped it in the new motherboard, took the memory, plopped it in, took the graphics card, plopped it in, charged the water cooling loop for the graphics card and everything. That was a day's worth of work to get everything going. Turn it on, start playing with it, still get crashes. Turn off overclocking,
Really?
everything's
Okay.
fine. Yep.
Okay.
So at that point, I'm like, this is looking like a processor problem. So at this point, I took everything back apart. I cleaned off the motherboard, put everything back together, took the motherboard back to Micro Center to return it. I said, yeah, this isn't going to work for me. Side note, I forgot to take my M2 drives out of that motherboard, so I had to call them in a panic and say, "Hey, don't put that back on the shelf yet. Let me come get my hard drives out of it."
Oops.
Yeah, because I was really flustered. Because here's the thing, I put a lot of effort into this thing. It's not working. It's stressing me out. It's bumming me out. It caused me a lot of stress. So mistakes were made, right? So I get the hard drives back. I take everything out of the computer. I basically take the 3900X and its motherboard. I put it back together. I put the RAM in it. I put the video card in it. I put all the radiators back in it. I charged the loop. I'm now operating back on my 3900X that I originally bought in December. It's working perfectly fine. I'm not having any crashes whatsoever. It's boosting to its heart's content. My temperatures are great. My gaming performance is great. So the lessons to be learned here was don't let perfect be the enemy of good. What I had was perfectly fine. Yeah, I'm disappointed that my 3950 is apparently not working. It's past my 30-day return period on Micro Center. I'd have to send it into AMD. I'm not willing to go through that hassle. I'm just content to know that I think I solved my problem and everything's working. I'm happy. And just to add insult to injury, the little LEDs on my CPU block that cost a lot of money for this particular build aren't working anymore. So the end.
Oh no, less LEDs. Whatever you do.
I know. It's just that little reminder of you left me when I was perfectly fine, right? It's getting its revenge on me. So that was my big adventure this week, and everything is back together. Call of Duty isn't crashing anymore. I've played 2 nights in a row without any issues. Yeah. So there we are. So I'm back.
Yeah, well, at least you can play your game again. So that's nice.
Yeah, and it is nice, and I like that game, and I have fun with it. The bigger thing for me is just knowing what the problem was, right? There's a certain satisfaction in knowing, this was the problem, and, I'm, 98% sure that was the problem, right? These crashes could come back tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe I've just been lucky. Maybe it's been a coincidence, but I don't believe in those. I think that I've got it, but that might change by next Thursday when we record again and you see the thing show up in the dock. Who knows?
Well, I hope not to see it for quite some time, but I did enjoy the story.
Yeah. And, of course, because I can't just go to Micro Center and buy something, without buying something else, I bought another case. So now I have 2 cases I'm not using, and I have this new third case. No, hold on. I can defend myself here.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because I went back to this other board, I wanted a case that I didn't have to vertically mount my GPU. So I bought a bigger version of the same case that I was using on my last build. It gives me greater flexibility for mounting my reservoir. I can mount bigger radiators in it. It has more space in it. It lights up really nice. It has an LED strip on the side, which I know you would appreciate. It has an abundance of USB ports on the front panel, which is nice. It has an actual reset button, which is getting harder and harder to find on cases these days. And it just it has USB-C on the front. I could also connect that to a lightning card if I wanted to, which I still might do. Actually, now that I think about it.
Okay.
Because I do have one of those. Let me see if I could actually do that. You know what? I could put this in there. Yeah, I could definitely put this Thunderbolt. Yeah, I could put this Thunderbolt 3 card in there and wire that up to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that might be the thing I do next. We'll see. Mini display port. Yeah.
That's a high quality sound. Is that a anti-static bag?
That is an anti-static bag. Yeah.
That's a good.
So
noise.
right now, yeah. So I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with that 3950X because that's a lot of money to leave on the table.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
I had gift cards to use towards that and everything, but I should probably mail it in.
Yeah. What does that look like? What does that kind of process with AMD look like?
I have no idea. I'm sure I RMA it. You
Okay.
know, who knows? Now here's the really fascinating thing to me. When I boot my computer up in the BIOS, it says that my processor's using 1.4 volts, which is really, really high. But
Okay.
that's apparently by design. So I've done a lot of reading on that too. Oh, the other thing I'm really excited about, this new case that I bought actually has an anti-sag bracket for my graphics card.
Oh, so correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of these big video cards are so heavy and so big that they need some sort of additional support to keep them from like putting undue stress on the connection point.
Exactamundo.
So this case has something built in to hold your graphics card.
Well, not built in. So,
Okay.
So you're absolutely right. Modern video cards, especially like triple slot or really like expensive video cards, are actually really heavy. And pro tip for all you system builders out there, the sign of a good motherboard is if you look at the motherboard and you look at the PCI Express slots, if PCI Express slots 1 and I believe it's 3 have what looks like little metal strips either around them or in them, that means they're reinforced and they won't bend and warp over time when heavy video cards are sitting in them. But that's not to mean that that's perfect. So a lot of times what people are doing now is people are either A, vertically mounting their GPUs. And what that amounts to is buying a special bracket that lets you mount your video card in such a way that it doesn't connect directly to the motherboard. Instead, what it is almost like a riser card that has a cable that plugs into your PCIe port, and then it extends, and then you plug that into your video card. So you can use that to vertically mount your video card and take all the strain off your motherboard, and it lets you see the side of your video card. So if you're like me and you have a water cooled video card, you can see the channels and the liquid, and it looks really cool.
Okay.
But this case came with 2 screws that instead of screwing directly into the motherboard, you basically screw these through the motherboard, and they're like offset screws that stick out a little bit. And then you put what essentially looks like an erector set piece, it has the holes in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You screw that to the riser screws, and then once you put your video card in, you take a little retention bracket that goes on that rail, and then you screw it down for tension, and it just gives extra support to the video card. I'm sure it's a $2 thing that you could probably buy on your own, but it came with the case, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use that.
Man, that's a nice touch.
Yeah. Lian Li makes really nice computer stuff.
Yeah, those are the cases I used back in the day too. Yeah.
Yeah. I will post some links and show notes about them. So. Anyway, enough computer talk. Tell me something good.
Last episode we talked about my new 16-inch MacBook Pro, and you were curious about how that fit in the existing cache I had in my Tom Bihn bag. The cache being the bag inside of a bag that is designed to kind of be your holder for your laptop. And the one that I had for my previous 15 was too small. The 16-inch MacBook kind of stuck out of the end, and that just wasn't good enough. And I had ordered the Cache 15C, which is they claim to hold the 16-inch MacBook Pro. And I'm happy to report that it fits.
Oh, nice.
Nice. This will be the thing that finally makes me happy, I think. My bag situation is on point. So,
all right. Now, did you get your? Sorry, did you get your little bag?
My little bag, yeah, whatever that was called. Yes, the Ghost Whale Organizer pouch, and It's tiny. It's very, very small, but it is a perfect size for my hair ties. So, yes, I haven't quite decided whether I'm going to leave it in the bottom pouch or kind of, because Tom Bihn's have all of those O-rings throughout throughout the bag where you can hang smaller bags in. So I have to figure out where I'm going to put it. But no, it is the perfect size for a bunch of hair ties, and I'm very pleased with my my Tom Bihn bag and bags within a bag.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that your bag situation is a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Yeah. Okay. So, boy, what do we want to talk about next? We gotta go to the backlog. We gotta
I know.
Stack.
Yeah. No. What do you want to? Oh, there it is. Perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah. So if you recall last show, I was stressed out a little bit because I had to give this big presentation last week. Happy to report that it mostly went fine. There was some rustling with some audio video equipment, but that's kind of par for the course these days.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my problem to solve. I was the guest. So, it was just a little bit of wrangling to get that working, but otherwise it went really fine. And, I put a topic in the show notes a couple weeks ago about kind of planning the perfect presentation. And kind of what I think makes a good presentation that you can give to people. Now, Paul, you've done a fair bit of presenting too, right?
Yes, back in the past when I used to be Paul Baylor. Yeah. There was a period of time where I did lots of user groups and some smaller conferences and stuff like that. So yeah, I am well aware of the sheer amount of work that can go into a 1 hour or an hour and a half or 45-minute presentation if you really want it to be high quality and I guess when you're giving a presentation, really, like, you're just hoping that some of the information that's coming out of your mouth sticks, right? Like, you just want to make some sort of impact. Like, I always kind of like to think, if they come out and can remember enough keywords to do a Google search and start diving into the topic, then I had succeeded. But it is a surprisingly amount. It's a lot of work to have a good polished presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, someone once told me that there's about 40 hours of prep for a good, solid 1 hour presentation.
Yeah, I believe it.
And that 40 hours of prep is good research, it's demos, it's the ability to adapt and know your material and be able to talk without having to constantly reference slides. Doing simple things like not turning your back to the audience and good use of your hands and just having the presence of mind to do it. Now, weird flex, but, I did a lot of presenting in my time. And, in the role I'm in now, I have to present even more. I've done in-person presentations to small groups of people. I've presented to hundreds of people at a time. I've presented remotely. For me, a presentation has to live up to what I consider to be my standard of a good presentation. I've never been a person who endures sales type talks that well.
Agreed. Yeah.
I'm not there for that. I don't really care about you trying to sell me something. I've always wanted to give presentations that were very technical in nature because I enjoy technical presentations. What that means is a little bit of slides and a whole lot of demos. So for me, when I'm planning my presentations, I like to not dwell a lot on what a thing is and instead show you what the thing is. Let the product or let the service or let the technology speak for itself. And, I just, the less I have to type and screw up the technology, the better. So for me, when I'm planning a presentation, I like to make sure that my demos are rock solid. So I spend a lot of time preparing really cool demos that highlight it and get people excited about it. Because like you said, right, if the goal is to have people basically plant a germ in their brain to go look at the thing that I talked about and get them as excited about it as I am. And I've also found that unless I'm genuinely excited about a particular thing, I'm not going to do well presenting it. So I like to choose topics and work on things that I enjoy rather than having to present things that I don't like, because it will definitely show. I know it shows for me, and I can promise you it will show for other people if you're just trying to glue a presentation together on some topic because someone asked you to, or you think it'll get picked for a a session at a conference just because it's a hot topic, but you don't particularly believe in it or like it, that will definitely come through to audiences. So for me, it's finding the right material, being excited about it already, and then spending a lot of time letting the technology show itself off. And I'm just kind of there. I'm like the vessel, right? I'm not there to do anything other than highlight the thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I felt the same way. Like my my presentations were very technology heavy, lots of demos. Yeah, I didn't want to talk. I'd rather not talk about a technology. I'd rather show a technology, let someone see how it actually works. They can kind of imagine them using it or them writing the code themselves. Yeah, I agree with you. I never really enjoyed where you get some, sales engineer from some company, and yeah, he's going to show you their product, but end of the day, he's just trying to, feed the pipeline for sales, and you can tell that's the goal. So like I picked technologies that I believed in, things that I was excited about, because like you want that energy to spill out, and also if you enjoy the technology, it's easier to spend those 40 hours, doing the work to make a tight hour plus presentation.
Yeah, totally. To be fair though, I remember attending a lot of presentations that you presented with friend of the show Nick Dunn, and those were really well done.
Yeah.
Internal type presentations that you did. I really enjoyed.
Yeah. And those, a presentation doesn't have to be like standing in front of a user group or something, right? Preparing for something for your company or your peers can be just as much work,
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it's the same regardless of who your audience is. Like you really have to, focus on your goal and make sure that your message is clear, and people are talking about what they've seen, not the horrible mistakes that you've made.
Yeah. Have you done any presenting recently, like at work or anything?
No, not really. Though I speaking of, people making mistakes, I still remember this one presentation very, very, very clearly. In fact, I can't even remember what the topic was, but I remember I was kind of excited. I went in, I sat in the back of the room, and all I really remember was I spent 15 minutes watching this person struggle to use Vim. And the topic was not about Vim. It was about something else. And it was like, I get it. You're better than me. You're using Vim as your text editor, but you clearly can't use it. Oof. And then I just left.
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah, and what that comes down to is just a lack of rehearsing. That's what that is.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so I had that big presentation last week, and I spent a lot. I didn't. The reason that I bring all this up to kind of put a bow on this is the presentation that I gave. I didn't have a ton of time to really work on it. Hold on, let me say that again. I did have a lot of time to work on it, but it was one of those things that I put it off, and then when I thought I was going to get to when I was going to get to work on it, I got pulled in like 6 different directions. So I really had to scramble. I was able to get all the content and hit all the things that I needed to talk about in this presentation. I hadn't practiced enough, and fortunately, I only had one demo break on me, but it wasn't a big deal. So it was working with a really cool group of people that didn't seem to mind, and they get it, and I still think that they were pleased with the content and how we talked about it, so I thought it went pretty good.
Now, when you rehearse, what kind of things do you focus on?
Like, what do you mean?
So, do you, focus on the demos? Do you, focus on, time? One of the things I always like to do is I always like to, pick parts of my presentation that I knew that I could cut if I was running long, or parts of the presentation that I could expand on if things are going fast, because sometimes, you get excited and you're talking a mile a minute and, you're where you're at supposed to be. I should be at like 30 minutes here, but I'm only at 20 because I'm just, the mouth is going a mile a minute. It's like so is there anything particular aspects of the presentation that you focus on when you rehearse?
Yeah, so typically what I do is I rehearse my demos and my content separately. So a lot of times I will put the demos together, test them, and just kind of know what they are. And then like if I'm doing like a PowerShell talk or like a Linux talk or a SQL Server talk or something, I basically have all the commands I'm going to run like in a file already saved and commented, and when to run them, or if there's setup I need to do, I'll basically know what that is ahead of time, and then I will rehearse the content separately, and I'll time myself, but like, depending on the length of the presentation, I'll time sections of it so I kind of know where I'm at in relation to the length of the talk that I have to give. So I focus more on the things that aren't hands-on keyboard, because the hands-on keyboard stuff you can kind of vamp a little bit, and if you can see that the audience is into it, or if you can see they're not getting it, like if you see a lot of puzzled faces, you can take a step back and go back and redo it or something like that. So for me, the demos aren't the thing I really rehearse. Instead, what I rehearse is the ability to talk to the slides without seeing the slides, like knowing where I'm at in a slide deck and knowing the content, and trying. Kind of the fun for me is trying to anticipate what questions I'm going to get, so I can quickly hit them without having to stall. So, but it's not like I'm going to know every answer. It's one of those, hey, see me afterwards, or let me write that down, or here's my card, right? Like I can deal with that.
That's the secret, right? If you get a question, first of all, if you're ever doing a presentation and the room is, of any size that's beyond like trivial, if someone asks you a question, please repeat the question so everybody can hear it.
Oh, right. Totally.
Oh my goodness. It just angers me so much when like the presenter is answering a question that you didn't hear, especially if you're in a situation where it's big and you're mic'd and the person asking the question is not. Just repeat the question. And if you don't know the answer is, that's a great question. Let's I'll give you my card, or let's talk afterwards, or even if the question is kind of like off topic, where you really don't want to go down that particular route, or it's a complicated answer, you just say, hey, that's a really great question. Let's meet up after the presentation and talk about that more.
Yep.
That way you're not
100%.
You're not dismissing that person, but you're like, hey, like that's gonna. Sometimes you just don't know, right? I think it's okay to not know something, right? Because like the only way you can handle being able to answer, all these questions is either having used it and you just have a deep, intimate knowledge of it, or just like, pulling yourself up by the bootstraps. That's a bad metaphor. Just research, learning.
Yeah, knowledge.
Turns out to answer questions, you need knowledge. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. When you're up in the Hollywood Hills with your Lamborghinis, knowledge.
All the Lambos.
There's a reference.
Yeah.
There's a reference. Yeah. I gotta go watch that video again. I like the one where the guy remixed it, or the person. I shouldn't assume it's a guy. The person remixed it, so like he says, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Oh, internet! The internet brings me such joy. What else is going on, man? I feel like it's enough presentation talk.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest. I'm so freaking exhausted.
We have a good solid 45 minutes of content. We could just that can be enough. Yeah.
Getting old sucks.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's Friday. I'm looking forward to the weekend. I'm looking forward to things calming down. I'm gonna be heads down next week. I say that now, but who knows, right? It could change tomorrow. But I'm working on I'm working on a really big project for somebody right now around Kubernetes and containers and everything, and that's been pretty humbling too, because I thought I knew my stuff about that, but oof. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot there, and I'll want to share it eventually once I get through this project. Some things that I didn't necessarily take for granted, I guess.
Yeah, it's the more I look into like containerization and Kubernetes, the more I realize that it's like it makes the easy stuff easy and the hard stuff possible. Which I guess is really what you want out of any good technology, right? But like there are some just deep dark corners in there that are just like you could really, I mean, you could probably make a pretty good career just out of really understanding Kubernetes networking.
Yep. Yeah, you're not kidding.
That could be what you do. That's it. You go around and help people with that.
Yep, I would agree with that. And like I haven't really had to focus too much on the networking side of things, but helping people with different storage classes and storage drivers, and
yeah, that's another thing. Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, obviously working with databases and working with data stores and things like that. Like that has been the bigger challenge for me. I mean, I understand how it works, right? But there's so many different ways you can do it. Like if you're on VMware, if it's software controlled, if it's hardware controlled, there's lots of different ways to connect Kubernetes to different storage types. Like, yeah, you just kind of have to understand what the options are. And
yeah,
yeah.
I think there's a difference between running it in a lab and running it at scale too. Like,
well, running it in production, period. Right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That you have to have a lot of confidence in yourself and your abilities and your hardware.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right. What do you say we wrap this one up, buddy? We both sound pretty tired.
Yeah, let's do it. As always, you can find the podcast on the internet at doingtheirbest.com. You can send us comments. You can send us feedback from the website. You can catch us on Twitter at doingbestpod. And I am Paul Baylor, and you can find me on Twitter at Paul Baylor. That's BAHLER. And where can we find you, Drew?
And I'm on Twitter at Pittsburgh, PATTFURG.
There you go.
All right, everybody. Until next time.
Yeah, thanks for listening.